We're Sarah and Ben. Welcome to our journey to van life.
Thanks very much for being here with us. To follow our journey from how we turn this into this, please like, subscribe and click the little notification bell. And we'll see you out there on the road sometime.
So you know, when these vans are designed and made by their manufacturers, they're designed to be just right, good vans for probably 90% of the people who use them. And what that means is that 90% of those people use them for cargo in the back. They'll load it up and the weight will be on the floor of the rear bed, down nice and low, and 90% of people will be absolutely fine with that. They'll get on really, really well. The snag we've got is that van builders don't just have the weight on the floor at the back all the time. We put a roof rack on the top with perhaps an awning, some solar panels, some fans. And I'm just going to show you what happens when you drive around a roundabout like this. We're going to do about 20 miles an hour around this roundabout, just driving perfectly normally as you would every day, and it leans over as we go through potholes like these. It rocks backwards and forwards like that, and when you come to leave the roundabout, you transition from the right to the left and the van tips back over to the other side. Now that's the effect of it's like a pendulum with having all the weight up on the roof and also cabinets inside and other fittings inside, that we don't distribute the weight evenly inside a van like this. The other thing, and this is an inconvenient truth of gravity, and that's that gravity's working all the time, whether you like it or not, whether you're driving or not. So even when our vans are parked, all of the weight is pushing down on those springs and it's affecting and causing wear to the springs even when it's parked. Another aspect of building a camper is that we actually take our vans pretty much up to the maximum weight that's permissible for the vehicle. So this is a 3.5 ton maximum gross vehicle weight, and I reckon it's going to be pretty close to being at that limit. So it's going to be getting close to the limits of what the suspension's designed to do. Again, most uses of vans, those 90% of vans that are on the road, get loaded up with some cargo. They're out there making drops during the day, and throughout the day the weight's reducing, and overnight and on the way back home again, more often than not they're empty. So I'm just going to go around this roundabout now, and let's have a look on the gauge that I've got fitted just behind me with a camera showing you what it's reading. This will tell you the angle that the van is leaning over to at the moment. I'm doing about 15 miles an hour, in fact more than that, about 18 miles an hour around this roundabout. And again, as we leave, we get that rock backwards and forwards. So I've spoken to some people and I've watched lots of YouTube videos about what you can do about this. How can you help to correct that lean that you can get and the sort of wallow that you can experience on the suspension on a van. Again, this is a standard 3.5 ton single axle Mercedes Sprinter, so it's not upgraded from factory to anywhere at all. So speaking with some guys at Rhodes Vans, they suggested that in fact the Sumo Springs were a really good option for the first thing to try. There's lots of other options with upgrading the leaf springs and putting additional springs on. They all cost a lot more money, and they advised that in fact I would probably find the most benefit from Sumo Springs. They'd be the most cost-effective first thing to try. So that's what I'm doing. When I get home now, I'm going to fit those, and then you'll be able to come out with me in the van probably tomorrow or in a couple of days' time, and we can experience what difference it's made. So bear with me, we'll fit these back at home and let's see what difference it makes in a few days' time when we're back out on the road. So we're back at home now and it's time to change these Sumo Springs. So as you can see, here's the van. I'm going to show you how they're fitted underneath. First of all show you the bump stops and then show you the comparison to the new Sumo Springs. So come with me under here, let's have a look. Okay, here we are then, underneath the van. So this is the bump stop, the original bump stop, and as you can see here's the axle. So when the axle reaches full compression, it'll hit this bump stop and then that prevents it hitting the chassis up here, and it controls the top end of the movement of the suspension. This then is the rear Sumo Spring, and you can see it will fit into exactly the same position there. And again, just like the front one, you can see it's a far more serious piece of equipment. Really, it should be, once the vehicle's back down on the ground, that gap at the bottom will be taken up and this will be resting on the axle permanently and taking up that extra bit of movement. So to actually do the fitting, I believe all you have to do is with the large screwdriver, this can be prized out. There we go. So there is the old bump stop, and again a comparison of old to new. You can see, or hopefully you can see, how serious a piece of equipment that is. Now I expect this is going to be quite stiff, but a bit of persuasion maybe just clean up the few bits of mud and road grime that's gathered in there over the years. I think I'll put the first one in on the other side. I reckon I've got my technique down now. So the first thing I did was just cleaned up any dust and stuff that was inside these slots, and then remembering slot to the back, and that, I'll give it a little tap just to make sure it's fully home there. Yep. Now the key thing is using a pair of grips, being able to take the end of this tab and bend it over to get the first bit in, and then pushing it into place with the screwdriver. So not easy at all, but you can just get it started. Ow. Like, ow. Okay, a few minutes messing about, and you can see now that both ends are in their slots. This gap here, the vehicle's still jacked up, so once it comes down off the jack, that gap will close up and it will be sitting down on the springs. So I'll get it down, get it all seated, tidy up all the tools, and let's take it out for a road test to see how good it is. So with the wheel removed here at the front, this is where the front bump stop is. I don't know if you can see, but that piece of rubber here is attached to the chassis here, and can you just see that circular mark on the lower suspension arm there? So when this suspension lifts fully up to full compression, that piece comes up and touches this piece of rubber, and that piece of rubber then compresses at the very end of the movement to stop this suspension arm hitting this piece of chassis. Little bit of wiggling and there you go, that's it in place. Just need to put the nut on top now and tighten it down and it's fitted. Well, there you have it, one fitted front Sumo spring. You can see a gap to the lower suspension arm, but as soon as the suspension's down back on the wheel, that'll be closed up and it will be resting on that spring and hopefully doing its job. Blustery day. I think there's a bit of a storm coming in. Yeah, definitely a bit of a storm. Hope you can still hear me okay. Well, we're coming up to that roundabout, the one we went round at 20 miles an hour yesterday. So I'm going to go around it again full circuit at the same speed as I did yesterday, and the recording of the angle gauge will show us what the difference is. So we're going around 20 miles an hour. On the gauge, the GPS may well say it's a little bit slower than that. Complete circuit, and it does feel nicely planted. And we come off again. And it's that transition between going around the roundabout and coming off again, where you're going from a fairly tight right turn straight into a left turn, and actually the van just transitions from one corner to the next. You don't get that wallowy bounce back again that it used to do when it was on the standard suspension. So we took this yesterday at 15 miles an hour. Same again today. Again, I'll do a complete circuit. It feels much better. This slower speed and tighter corner, I'm probably actually going a bit faster than 15 miles an hour, and it feels very, very secure, nicely planted. Did you see that white van cut me up just there? Fantastic. Well, just to conclude on my experiences of fitting the Sumo Springs to this van. Before we did it, it was certainly rocky. You know, the van would move quite a lot. It'd swing from left to right as you're going around corners, if you're hitting a pothole, or any time when you're transitioning from a left to a right, or the opposite, when you're coming off a roundabout, or any sort of road conditions like that. And it was never unstable, but it was, you know, it could have been better. Particularly, I think it was impacted by the weight that we've put up high with the roof rack, the solar panels and the awning that's up on the roof of the van. And as we've fitted it out inside with the cabinets and things up high, we have affected the centre of gravity. It's also running pretty much at its maximum weight all the time, so you don't get those opportunities of when you're using it empty like you would on a normal van that's just used for transport. So we looked around and found that the Sumo Springs were likely to be a good cost-effective option as a way of improving the suspension. As it turns out, the angle, when you measure the angle that the van moves over to on corners, it doesn't actually make much difference. It's maybe 1 or 2 degrees, which is very, very small amount. But the van actually feels totally transformed. It feels like a completely different van. And that's because it's far more stable. It doesn't do that wallow. It doesn't rock from one side to the other. And it's just generally far more planted and far more stable. So really, the relatively small investment in the Sumo Springs, certainly when compared to upgrading springs and shock absorbers and so on fully, or lifting the suspension or any of those other options, it really has turned out to be a very cost-effective option. So I can highly recommend them. Speak to the guys at Rhodes Vans. They'll sort you out with exactly what you need. The fitting is quite easy. You saw earlier that technique with the grips. That's fine. Probably worth wearing some gloves, because otherwise you're going to lose some of the skin on your knuckles and you're going to be a bit frustrated for a while. But overall, give yourself a couple of hours and I'm sure you'll be able to get it sorted, and it makes such a difference to the handling of the van. So that was the Sumo Springs. Don't forget, check in next time, like and subscribe if you're enjoying what you're seeing in these videos, and there'll be many more videos coming along very soon. And then once the build's complete, you'll see us out there on the road using this for what it's intended. Good to have you here. See you again next time. Bye for now. Now then, the keen-eyed amongst you may have noticed that there are no leaves on the trees right now. And I told you earlier that this was our first drive where we were just testing how much lean we get on this van. Well, that's absolutely right, and the recordings that we showed you earlier of the angle that the van was leaning over to were absolutely right. They were filmed before I'd fitted the Sumo Springs to this van. Unfortunately, the video I recorded talking about it got corrupted or lost somehow. So I've had to record this part again after I'd actually fitted all the springs. But everything that I said was absolutely right. It was all the same as I'd said before that we'd fitted the Sumo Springs. So it is absolutely right. The only snag is it's now the autumn time and there's no leaves on the trees. So you just have to bear with it, that the wonders of camera trickery, that this just pretend that this is before I fitted those springs. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.